you could please join me in welcoming Anne Curry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. Thinking about talking to you today, this is probably one of the most heartbreaking subjects for me personally, because no matter what we've done, it is not enough for what we must do, as you all know, and I'm sure that you don't need for me to say, but I will begin by saying that, I don't know of any time in my lifetime, and I think that there have been few times in American history, in world history, when we have needed an informed populace about the difficulties in the world. And yet, we are also in a time when the mechanism to inform the world is changing dramatically, moving in ways that are both good and bad. And the question will be sort of, how will it all end up? Journalism, I was joking, is going through a sort of a self-identity crisis, and it's funny on one hand, but it's sort of not on another. There is a change that is fundamental, that is permanent, and the question will be not whether the American people will be informed, because they will. There cannot be a democracy. The American people will insist on being informed. The question will be, how fully will they be informed? And the dilemma there is going to be, who is going to pay for the kind of reporting that you all in this room, and I too, believe is so important. You have long known, as most of you I understand are members of communication, sort of the communication tribe, trying to communicate with reporters to get them to do stories about what's happening in the world. And so you've long known the difficulties. The difficulties are, to some degree, that most of these news organizations have to feel like people are interested, and it's a lot of money to cover foreign news. It takes a lot of money to send people out there with crews and even newspaper reporters out to be gone for long periods of time to do a or two stories. So it's a big investment. And then at the same time, these news organizations are worried about whether their readers, viewers are interested, listeners are interested, whether there'll be a gain of some sort. And here's the interesting thing. The first time, I've been to Darfur 4 times, and the first time I went, I remember it was really tough to convince the news organization to send a little team. I begged and kicked and screamed and pushed and yelled and all those things, well, sort of nicely, but still I did those things. And I got one cameraman and myself on the team. And then a week before we were to go, actually a few days before we were to go, my news executives had a change of heart, and they said, well, gosh, maybe we should send you with, maybe a security person, and maybe we should send you with maybe we should send you with a sound man. I mean, and maybe you need a producer. I mean, they became concerned that they had cut back the trip too much. In the end, we were a small team, but we went. And when I got back, the interesting reaction was from many of my colleagues, as well as the public. Before we went to air, they said, man, that was really brave of you to go. And I said, why? Did you think I was going to be hurt or something? Were you worried about me? And I said, because things are generally fine until they're not when you're in these kinds of circumstances. And the person said to me, well, more than one, but one said it very succinctly. He said, no, actually, I was saying you were being brave because, you were risking your career on a story I thought that Americans wouldn't care about. Darfur at that time, as you probably remember, this was in 2006, the most amazing reporter on this story in America has been Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times. And he has refused to stop reporting the story as a commentator, as a commentary writer in the New York Times. But few others really took it up. And in 2006, it was actually true. If you said the word Darfur outside your community, and you said it in the broader US community, most Americans would say, huh, what are you talking about? Because not everybody read the New York Times. Nick Gillis is a friend of mine, so I asked if I could go with him on a trip, and that's how I went for the first time. And we went on television with our reporting when we got back, and I interviewed him and all this, and the interesting thing was this: while the story was on television, and no one was more surprised than my news executive producer, but he came to me afterwards and said, while your story ran, during it, the numbers went up. People do care. And the interesting thing now is, I've gone back now 4 times, and I just got back in February from another trip. And now if you say Darfur, people think you're an idiot if you don't know what's going on. People have made movements, they've stood together, they've marched, they've written, they've pressured Bush and now Obama. They're envoys. There's a lot of blah, blah, blah about it. But I can tell you, for the people on the ground, not much has changed. And so it takes a lot of reporting, it takes a lot to create the kind of political will to really, I think, affect change in people's lives. I think the case of Darfur is specifically problematic because unlike Congo or even Kosovo,